does the idea of Prarabdha exist only to help us let go of ego? That is, Bhagavan taught us the law of karma, and the reason he taught this law of karma is true. Is true insofar as ego is true. That is, the law of karma. It's only for ego, and it partakes of the seeming reality of ego. Ultimately, karma is not real. What is real is only being. That is what we are seeking. We are seeking to know, who am I? So what we are investigating is our being, because being alone is real. Doing is unreal. So karma means doing. So karma is unreal. But though it is unreal, so long as we rise as ego, karma seems to be real. It is as real as ego. So, but the reason why Bhagavan taught us this law of karma is because if we understand this correctly, it is a great aid to us in following this path. As I will explain as I go on to answer each part of the question. So I'll go through the question bit by bit just to answer it. As I understand it, Prarabdha is for ego. Yes, all karma is only for ego. Ego is the doer of the agamya and the experiencer of the fruit of agamya. So Prarabdha is the fruit of the agamya. So ego is both the doer and the experiencer. As Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Uludunapadu, if oneself is the doer of action, one will, if we are the doer of action, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. If we know ourselves by investigating who is the doer of action, doership will depart and all the three karmas will come to an end. This is liberation, which is eternal. So why does he say, if we investigate, if we know ourselves by investigating who is the doer of action? What he means by that is, if we know what we actually are by investigating who is the doer of action, what we actually are is not the doer of action. The doer of action is ego. But by investigating ego, we come to know its underlying reality. Just like if you see what seems to be a snake, if you look at it very carefully, you will see that it is just a rope. Not a snake at all. Likewise, if we attend to ego very closely, we will see that what it actually is just pure awareness, is not ego at all. Since the doer of karma and the experience of the fruit of karma is only ego, when ego is annihilated, when we know ourselves as we actually are, ego will thereby be annihilated. So that is what Bhagavan means by doership will depart, because doership and experiencership are both the nature of ego. So long as we rise as ego, we identify ourselves with a bundle of 5 sheaves. And the instruments of action of this bundle of 5 sheaves are the body, the speech, and the mind. So by these 3 instruments, we do actions. So we seem to be the doer of action because of our identification with these 5 sheaves. So, and because we experience ourselves as the doer of actions, we also have to experience the fruit of those actions. But when we know ourselves as we actually are, ego will thereby be annihilated. So doership and experiencership will come to an end. Without a doer, there cannot be any agamya. Without an experiencer, there cannot be any fruit of agamya. So all 3 karmas, that means agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha, all come to an end. Agamya is the actions that we do under the sway of our vasanas. In other words, the actions we do according to our own will. These are the actions that bear fruit. When we do an action, the fruit is not in our hands. The fruit is in the hands of God. It is God alone who determines what is the appropriate fruit for each action and when, where, and how we should experience that fruit. So if we do an action, we do not experience the fruit of that action immediately. That the fruit of that action gets stored in what is called sanchita, which is sanchita literally means a heap or pile. So that's the store of all the fruits of past karmas, but we haven't yet experienced. Prarabdha is a selection of those fruit, but are allotted for us to experience in this lifetime. It is God who allots this prarabdha, who selects which fruit are appropriate for us to experience in this lifetime. So yes, prarabdha is for ego, is only for ego. All karma is only for ego. And then the question goes on, it is ego that creates the world and everything in it. Yes, by rising as ego, all this entire world is a dream. The dreamer of this world is ego. So when we dream, we create the dream world, but we do not experience ourselves as the creator of the dream world because we mistake ourselves to be a person within that dream world. So instead of experiencing ourselves as the creator, we experience ourselves as a creature, a person in the dream. That's why as a person in the dream, we seem to have no control over the dream because though we are the creator of the dream, we have identified ourselves with just one among the things that we created, namely a person in that dream. And the question goes on, and when I as a person am real, the world and God are also real. Well, we are not real. We seem to be real. When that is, we means ego is not real. And ego is what takes itself to be a person. So neither ego nor the person we take ourselves to be are real. However, though they are not real, they seem to be real. And because they seem to be real, the world and God also seem to be real. Here, when we talk about God in relation to that is, when we see God as something other than ourselves, that God is not God as he really is, but God as he seems to be from a perspective of ego, because God is the real nature of God is our own real nature. That is the underlying reality. But when we rise as ego, we limit ourselves as a person, we see a world outside, and our own real nature, the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving nature of our real nature, we see as a God who is something other than ourselves. So these all seem to be real, but they are not real. They seem to be real only so long as we rise as ego. And just one clarification here. In Bhagavan's teachings, when Bhagavan talks about real and unreal, what does he mean by these terms? Real in this context means what actually exists. Unreal means what does not actually exist, even though it may seem to exist. So ego, world, and God all seem to exist, but do not actually exist. What actually exists is the underlying reality of ego, which is pure awareness, which is the true nature of God, God as he actually is. So we need to distinguish between God as he appears to be from the perspective of ego and God as he actually is. God as he actually is what we actually are. But when we rise as ego, God seems to be something other than ourselves. The question then goes on, but my real nature is God. God allotted the prarabdha I have to experience in this lifetime. So I myself, as my real nature, gave my own destiny to myself, ? This is a very, very subtle matter, but we have to understand here. That is, yes, God is our real nature. The nature of God, our own real nature, is pure being. So God does not actually do anything. But God is not only pure being, he is also pure love. He is infinite love, because the very nature of God is, well, the nature of any sentient being is to be aware, is to love itself. As Bhagavan says in the at the start of the first paragraph of Nana, since all living beings, all jivas, want to be happy always without misery, since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself. So in that second clause, he says, we all have greatest love for ourselves. Why is that? Because love is our real nature. Our real nature is one and indivisible. So infinite love for ourselves, as we actually are, is our real nature. That is reflected in jiva, in the ego, as love for myself as this person. So since God is our own real nature, God is infinite love. That his very nature is infinite love. But in the view of God as he actually is, there are no others. So God does not see us as anything other than himself. So God knows us as his own reality, as himself, and therefore he loves us as himself. Literally, he loves us as himself because he doesn't see us as anything other than himself. So God is infinite love. That infinite love that is God is what we experience as grace. So grace does not do anything, but everything happens by its power. So in the 15th paragraph of Nana, of Who Am I, Bhagavan explains that all the five panchakriti, the five divine functions, that is creation, sustenance, that means the creation of the world, sustenance of the world, the dissolution of the world, the tirodhana, that's the veiling power of ignorance, and grace. All these happen by the special nature of the merely by the mere special nature of the presence of God. So the presence of God means his being. He doesn't actually do anything, but just by being as he is, everything happens as it is meant to happen. Why does it happen as it's meant to happen? Because he is infinite love, and that love seems to us to be doing all this, but it's not. It's doing it without actually doing anything. It's doing it just by being as it is. And of course, God and his grace are not two different things. Grace is the very nature of God. Grace is the infinite love that is God, the infinite love that God has for all of us as himself. So when we try to understand this by our mind, obviously we can't understand it adequately because our minds are finite and God and his grace are infinite. So we cannot with our mind adequately understand this, but at least we can grasp certain principles. But though God is not doing everything, everything is being done by his mere presence because he is infinite love. So everything is happening as it should because God is infinite love. So the question, so I myself as my real nature give my own destiny to myself. That is true in a sense. That is, God is our own real nature. God is infinite love. Because he is infinite love, he doesn't want to cheat us with the mere pleasures of life. He wants to restore us to our real nature, because our real nature is infinite happiness. So God wants nothing less for us than infinite happiness. So the Prarabdha is given to us in such a way that will be most conducive to our spiritual development, that is, to our progressing towards the stage where we are willing to surrender ourselves completely and thereby merge back in our real nature, which is infinite happiness. So all this is happening by God, by grace, I mean, these are all words. We can't adequately say these things, but so long as we rise as ego, God seems to be other than ourselves, even though he is actually our own real nature. God seems to be doing so many things, even though he's actually just being. So everything is happening by the special nature. That is what Bhagavan says in that paragraph of Nana, that 15th paragraph. Isan Sanidana Visesha Matrata, by the mere special nature of the presence of God. That special nature of the presence of God is infinite love, which is what he is, which we experience as grace. And then the question goes on, but God has nothing to do with the world but came into existence together with ego. God has everything to do with the world because God is the underlying reality. God is the underlying reality of both ego and world. And that underlying reality is infinite love. So that infinite love is shaping this world in such a, this world means everything that we experience in this life, it is shaping it in such a way that will be most conducive to our spiritual development, our progress in the spiritual path. So why does he decide what I have to experience in my life? Because he is infinite love. He decides it without deciding everything. Just by being as he is, he decides everything. He decides what is best for us because he loves us as himself. And then the question goes on. The world does not really exist. I do not really exist. But God is still concerned about my spiritual development. That is, God does not see us as the person we seem to be. God sees us as we actually are, which is as himself. So he has infinite love for us as himself. But because we see ourselves as this person, we see that love that God has for us working in the form of grace, which is shaping our destiny, shaping our Prarabdha. And then the question goes on. He acknowledges the existence of ego, birth, death, karma, and so on. So long as it seems to us that God is something other than ourselves, that God who seems to be other than ourselves also seems to acknowledge the existence of ego, birth, death, and everything. But what God actually experiences is the underlying reality of all these things. So what we experience as all this multiplicity, ego, birth, death, karma, and so on, is what God experiences as his own being. So God experiences everything that we experience, but he does not experience it as we experience it. He experiences it as all as infinite being, infinite awareness, infinite happiness, infinite love, because that is what all this is. It's we who make the mistake of seeing all these as all these multiplicity with all its changes of birth and death and karma and so on. So if we take God to be something other than ourselves, we have to acknowledge that he sees all these things as we see them. But the truth is, he sees all these things as they actually are, which is as himself, the one and only reality, the one and only thing that actually exists. Why does God interfere with something that is just an appearance? Yes, all this is just an appearance, but to us it seems very real. Because it seems real, we are suffering. Though this is all just an appearance, we are really suffering in this appearance. So because he is infinite love, he wants what is best for us. And because he wants what is best for us, it seems to us that he is interfering. Interfering means graciously interfering. He's shaping all that we are experiencing, all that we are to experience, in such a way that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. the question said, I really don't understand. We cannot understand these things adequately so long as we are trying to understand by the mind. We can understand to some extent, but we cannot understand perfectly, because ultimately all there is to understand is one. There's all this multiplicity, none of this is real. It's all Maya. But so long as we're experiencing all this Maya, it all seems to be coherent. It all seems to have its own internal logic. But it is all the force that is behind all of this is the infinite love that is God Himself, and that we experience as His grace.